Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Bedtime Stories with Yash, where I, Yash Sharma, reads you two new stories every single evening. Now, without further ado, I'd like to tell you about the very special book that I have for you today. It's The Tale of Sinbad. Now, this book is very special and brings in a lot of nostalgia, meaning it brings in a lot of good memories from my childhood, because this particular story back in the days was available in form of books too, but my grandfather gave me an audio cassette of this particular book. And I grew up listening to stories of Sinbad and many others. This was my best friend when I was 6 years old, and I used to listen to the story all day long on the analog tape recorder that we had back in the days. So this story has brought a lot of good memories for me, and I want this story to be with you forever. We are going to finish this book today. It's, I think, a 30-page book that we are going to read. Yeah, 31-page book that we are going to read today. And I'm only going to read this book, but the reason why I'm just going to read one book is because I want to tell you how interesting a book can be for you if you start reading it with passion. Okay, so you should always target reading a 30 or 40 page book and finishing it through one read. Okay, whenever you start reading a book. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into it. The Tale of Two Sindbads. Chapter 1. Sinbad the Sailor returns home. The city of Baghdad was just beginning to wake. The river sparkled in the morning light as the sun rose. A tall, handsome man stood alone on the deck of a sailing ship, admiring what he saw. He had been away traveling for 3 long years and had had many adventures. At last, he was back in the city where he was born. So Sinbad the sailor had been out for 3 years from his hometown, which was in Baghdad. Okay, and when he went for the sail, probably his family must have seen him off, but then he did not inform anyone, because naturally there were no telephones back in the days, so he could not inform anyone. So now he is coming to Baghdad when the city is just beginning to wake, so it's morning. This man was Sinbad the sailor, one of the richest and most famous travelers in the world, but you would not have known it to look at him. When he went away, a great crowd of people had come to wave him goodbye, but now there was nobody to welcome him home. Nobody knows I'm here, he told himself. Everyone thinks I'm dead or I've gone away forever. He ran his fingers through his bushy beard and looked down at his dirty clothes. I need to go back home, have a bath and change into clean clothes, he thought. But suddenly he had an idea. What fun it would be to keep a secret that the fact that I was still alive. He could wander the streets like a stranger. Perhaps he would find out if anyone still remembered him. So now Sinbad, as he has come to the city, he wants to check if anyone remembers him or not. So he thought to himself first that maybe he should go back home, get ready, get dressed nicely, and then talk to people about his journey. But then later he got an idea. He said, no, why not? I just roam around the streets just like that, and let's see if anyone remembers me. Okay? So this is Sinbad the sailor running his fingers through his bushy beard. He walked slowly through the quiet, narrow streets and the empty marketplace, but the peace and quiet did not last. It was not long before babies woke up and started crying. Then the donkeys began to bray. More and more people began to get out of bed and throw open their small doors. Soon, carts were rumbling past and the smell of baking bread filled the air. So as Sinbad was moving through the streets, he could notice that there was a particular quietness all across the road. But then soon, as he was walking further and further, he got to know the peace and the quiet is not going to last, because the children started crying as they woke up in the morning. Then the donkeys began to bray and more people started opening their doors, coming out on the streets and then getting into their day. Sinbad's tummy rumbled almost as loudly as the carts. He needed a good breakfast. It was then that he remembered that he did not have any money. He did have a bag of diamonds hidden under his shirt, but he could not use diamonds to buy breakfast. What was he going to do? So, this is Sinbad, he was very hungry walking through the streets, and then suddenly he remembers that I don't have any money. How am I going to buy food? But he remembers that he has diamonds under his shirt. Okay, now tell me, what would you do if you've got some diamonds under your shirt, huh? Chapter 2, Two Sindbads. As Sinbad walked along feeling hungry, he saw a boy dressed in rags. The boy was sitting on a wall drinking a bowl of milk. Sinbad could not stop himself licking his lips. "What are you staring at?" said the boy, feeling rather frightened. Now, the boy who was sitting on a wall, he was slightly poor. He was wearing rags. Rags as in clothes that are torn, or clothes that are, stitched up improperly. So he started, Sindbad, since he was very, very hungry, he smacked his lips like that. And he looked at the boy, and the boy started staring at him and said, "What are you looking at, huh?" He was a little frightened because he didn't know who this man was. "Forgive me, young sir," said Sindbad. Now look at the politeness of Sindbad. "Forgive me, young sir." It's always good to be polite. "I've just arrived in the city, and I haven't had any breakfast yet." "Why don't you buy yourself something to eat?" said the boy. "But I have no money," answered Sindbad. "Times are hard, stranger," said the boy. "I can't find work myself, so I know what it's like to be hungry." "You can have some of this if you like." He offered Sindbad his bowl of milk. Now the boy was very generous. He said, "I know what it feels like to have no money. It's hard to find work nowadays. Okay? "Thank you. That's very kind of you. I'll just have a sip," said Sindbad. "Do you mind if I sit on the wall for a moment?" Now Sindbad said thank you. He appreciated the boy's gesture and said, "That's very kind of you." And Sindbad asked Sindbad again. The boy's name was also Sindbad. But the boy Sindbad doesn't know that this man is also Sindbad yet, okay? So he said, "Please let me sit on the wall for a moment." And the boy agreed. Sindbad sat down and they began to chat. "What's your name?" asked Sindbad. The boy told him. Sindbad opened his eyes wide with surprise. The boy's name was Sindbad too. Sindbad wasn't ready to give away his name yet. "You can call me Ahmed," he replied. So this is the little boy, and this is Sindbad sitting on the wall. He was almost surprised. He thought maybe this boy will recognize him. But no, he didn't recognize him. So Sindbad told him that my name is Ahmed. "Of course, I'm not the famous Sindbad," said the boy, seeing the surprised look on the stranger's face. "Sindbad the sailor used to live here in the city, in a house as big as a palace. Everyone liked him. He was always building and buying and selling and finding work for people to do. Even poor people like me. Everyone talked about his amazing travels and adventures. We all loved hearing about him, even if they weren't true. But now he's gone and nobody knows where. Maybe he won't ever come back." "So you won't believe the stories about his adventures?" Sindbad asked. So this is the little boy Sindbad, and this is the elder Sindbad, who was acting to be Ahmed. So Sindbad said, "Don't be surprised. I'm not the famous Sindbad. Everyone likes Sindbad. Sindbad used to live here in the city, and he used to live in a palace, a big house. Okay? And he used to build and buy and sell and find work for the poor. He was very generous and everyone loved him. But he has gone now, and we don't know whether he's going to come back or no." And he also mentioned that everyone talked about his amazing travels, okay, and adventures. But nobody knows where he is, and maybe they all weren't true. So Sindbad asked, the elder one asked, "Don't you believe the stories about Sindbad's adventures?" "No, I don't. I don't believe in giants or sea monsters. I don't believe that he was once carried away by an enormous bird called a rock. People say that the rock was so big that it laid eggs the size of an island," laughed young Sindbad. "And people also say he was always giving away diamonds to the poor. I can't believe that he would give away a few coins, but why would a rich man give away diamonds to beggars?" So the young Sindbad, this boy, adds on saying that I don't believe that he was carried away by a rock. A rock is a very big giant bird whose eggs are the size of an island. Okay. and he doesn't believe in giants or doesn't believe in sea monsters, because Sindbad had these famous adventurous stories about himself, that he was captured by monsters, he was fighting sea monsters, and he was, battling giants. So all of these stories existed in Baghdad, but the young boy didn't believe them. Said Sindbad with a twinkle in his eye. I know a good story about Sindbad the sailor. Would you like to hear it? Oh, yes, Ahmed, I like a good story, replied young Sindbad. But first, have another drink of milk. Sindbad started to tell the story of how 3 years ago he had left his comfortable home in Baghdad and bought a splendid ship, gathered a crew to sail it, and set out to look for treasure in unknown lands. The boy listened quietly as the story began. So now Ahmed, the elder Sindbad, is going to tell young Sindbad a story. The story of Sindbad. For several weeks at sea, Sindbad had bad luck. There was no wind and the boat couldn't move at all. Sometimes they ran out of water and the crew fell ill. Sometimes they nearly froze in snow and ice. But at last they sailed into warm blue waters again. But all of a sudden, a great storm blew up. The ship was blown onto some rocks at the end of a little island. Luckily, the storm went away just as quickly as it had started, and Sindbad and his crew began to repair their ship. Then they tried to drag it back into the water before they could float the ship again. They noticed some people coming towards them. Sindbad and his crew got ready to fight, but then they saw that the islanders had no weapons. It seemed that they had been hiding in the forest, and now they had come down to the beach to welcome the sailors with fresh water and fruits. So this is Sindbad along with the sailors, and these are the people from the island where he had reached. So for several weeks at sea, Sindbad's ship was floating around. Since there was no wind, the ship could not move. So back in the days, the ships did not have any motors, or they did not have any engines. So they were dependent majorly on the winds that flew on the ocean. Sometimes they would run out of water, and sometimes they would fall ill because there was no food or good water on the ship, and sometimes they nearly froze in ice. But then at last they sailed into warm blue waters. But then that peace was not just there. A great storm blew up and the ship was blown onto rocks at the island. Okay, so luckily Sindbad and his men were safe. They reached the island, they got down, they pulled the ship out of the water, and they started mending it. They got ready to fight as they saw some people approaching their ship, but then they were comforted by the feeling that these people don't have any weapons. They are just islanders. Islanders meaning the people who live on that island. Okay. Sindbad could not help feeling that something was wrong. He did not trust the islanders. Although he was very hungry and the fruit looked delicious, he thought that they laughed and smiled too much, and they seemed to be watching the crew as if they were waiting for something. While his crew filled their tummies, he secretly hid his fruit in his shirt. When nobody was looking, he slipped away the hill. He hid among some bushes and covered in red and yellow peppers. Okay. So Sindbad was a little suspicious about this fact that these islanders were way too welcoming. वो होता है ना कि कभी कभी बहुत अच्छा कोई बिहेव करता है तो अच्छा नहीं लगता है. There's something fishy. So he felt the same thing. He felt that there's something fishy, there's something wrong with these islanders. Probably they are not as good as they appear to be. Okay, so while his crew was filling up their tummies, that means they were eating, Sindbad hid his fruits and he went up the hill watching the people. Sindbad peeped through the bushes at the beach far below. He was horrified to see that all his men were lying on the sand. They weren't moving, and he was not sure whether they were dead or asleep. Perhaps the fruit had been poisoned? Sindbad spent a very sad and miserable night in the pepper bushes. What could he do to save his crew? Now Sindbad, as he was looking through the bushes, he could see that his people, his crew, fell down to the ground on the beach. And he was horrified to see and because he did not know whether they are dead or they were unconscious. Maybe the fruits were poisoned, but he could not know for sure. So Sindbad spent a very miserable night over there on the island. At sunrise next morning, Sindbad looked down from his hiding place and was amazed to see that there was no one on the sand below. After a few minutes, he could hear the islanders calling to each other. He decided to go down the hill secretly to find what was happening. He soon discovered that his crew were now prisoners. Each man had been tied to a tree and left to die without food or water. Now we begin chapter 3, where Sinbad is telling the story, where Sinbad says that the next morning when he woke up, he could see from his hiding place that there were no men on the sand as they were yesterday. And he looked here and there for a few minutes, but then he could hear a few islanders talking to each other, calling each other out. Okay, so then he decided to go down secretly and find out what's happening. He soon discovered that his crew were kept prisoners. Every person was tied to a tree and left to die without food or water. Okay, so these were Sindbad's crew members who were tied using a rope to the trees. He ran down to the shore to look for his ship. It had been dragged off the rocks and back into the water. Now it was far out to the sea, sailing away. These people weren't islanders at all, cried Sinbad. They were pirates. Pirates meaning people who steal on the sea. Quickly he hurried back to the trees and untied his crew. They were glad to see him, but their joy turned to sorrow when they found out that they were trapped on the island with no way of escape. Okay, so Sinbad went to the shore to see that his ship was taken away by the pirates. So he quickly ran back to his crew members and untied them. They were all very happy to see Sinbad, but they also knew that it's going to be a very sad time for them because their ship had been stolen and they had no way to escape out of this island. Sinbad kept his men busy. He didn't want them to lose hope. First, he ordered them to look for food. They soon discovered that the only thing to eat on the island were red and yellow peppers, growing on the hill where Sinbad had been hiding all night. Now that they had food, Sinbad told his crew to take in turns to keep a lookout from the top of the hill. Day after day, they looked out across the sea, but it was many months before the watching and waiting was rewarded. One afternoon, a ship appeared on the horizon. Okay, so since Sinbad didn't want his men to lose hope, he ordered them to look for food on the island. But then they could notice that the only food that was growing on the island was red and yellow peppers. Red and yellow Shimla mirch. Okay, so if you don't know what red and yellow pepper is, ask your mummy to show you red and yellow Shimla mirchi at home. Okay, so they found that that was the only food available on the island. So they were going to eat chilies now every day. So Sinbad told them to look out over the sea in case there is any ship coming by so that they could signal the ship and maybe ask for help. Okay, so days passed by, weeks passed by, and months passed by. Then they saw a ship approaching. "Ship ahoy!" yelled the lookout. The men on the shore shouted and waved, but the ship sailed on. It was too far away to see them. It was Sinbad himself who had the idea to light a fire. "Come on, men," he shouted. "Gather as much wood as you can. We need to make a fire." Black smoke soon rose above the trees. The ship changed direction and turned back towards the island. But Sinbad's troubles were not over yet. It soon became clear that the ship was heading for the rocks at the end of the island. So, "Ship ahoy!" Someone who was looking out at the horizon, who was looking out over the sea, yelled, "Ship ahoy!" That means there is a ship. People look out, there's a ship. The men on the shore shouted and waved, but the ship could not see them. Since the ship was very far off, it could not. The people there, the crew members, could not grab the ship's attention. So Sinbad had an idea. He called his men. He said, "Gather as much wood as you can so that we can light a big fire." And the black smoke quickly rose. And then the ship caught the attention of the smoke and then started moving towards the rocks of the island. But Sinbad was a little worried because the ship was directly moving towards the rocks. And if it would hit the rocks, the ship would again be damaged, and then these people would not have been able to escape. Again, it was Sinbad who acted. "I must warn them," he cried. He dived into the waves, his sharp sword between his teeth, and began to swim. There were sharks and sea monsters in the sea, but Sinbad was not afraid. When one of the biggest sea monsters tried to eat him, Sinbad simply cut off two of its heads. After that, the sharks avoided Sinbad and attacked the monsters instead. So, it was Sinbad who then acted. Sinbad said, I must warn them, and he quickly dived into the sea. Now, there were sea monsters and sharks in the sea, but then he did not care. He said, then I need to warn these people. He held his sword between his teeth, okay, and then started swimming. When the sea monsters tried to attack Sinbad, he simply cut the two heads of the sea monster with his sword. And then the sharks were attracted to the blood of the sea monster, and then they started eating the sea monster and left Sinbad alone. Sinbad the sailor kept swimming until he reached the ship. Ahoy there, he called to warn the captain about the rocks ahead. Strong arms pulled him on board. And soon Sinbad was helping the captain steer safely towards the shore. The captain explained that he was working for a rich king. The king's favorite food was peppers. He had eaten all the peppers in his kingdom, and the captain had been sent to search for some more. So far, they had discovered none. What luck! Cried Sinbad. My crew and I can help you fill this whole ship with peppers. Okay, so then this is Sinbad along with this person who was the captain of that ship. The captain of the ship pulled Sinbad up on the ship, and then he told Sinbad that he was working for a king and whose favorite food was peppers, yellow and red peppers that were growing on that island. So Sinbad then safely steered the ship to the island and then told this person that, I and my crew members can help you fill the entire ship with peppers. Chapter 4. In the Power of the Rich King. So thanks to Sinbad, he and his crew were rescued from the island. They were taken to the city of the rich king. The king was overjoyed to see so many peppers. He was even more impressed when the captain of the ship told him about Sinbad's courage and cleverness. In fact, the king was so pleased that he held a great feast in Sinbad's honor and invited him and his crew to join. He also presented Sinbad with a bag of diamonds. So Sinbad now was finally rescued by that person and brought to the kingdom of the rich king. Okay, and the captain of the ship, told the king about Sinbad's cleverness and Sinbad's wisdom and general courage. So Sinbad was awarded for his cleverness and his courage, and with a bag of diamonds. What a pity that the king was so greedy. He ate such a lot of peppers at the feast that he got a terrible pain in his tummy. The king began to shout and scream, "Help! Sinbad has poisoned me!" He ordered his guards to take Sinbad away and lock him up. Once again, Sinbad thought quickly. He hid some bread and his diamonds under his clothes before the guards took him away and locked him in a dark cave. So the king, who had eaten too many peppers, anything in excess is not good. So he had eaten excess of peppers. Okay, so his tummy started to ache. But Sinbad acted very cleverly that time too. He hid his diamonds and a piece of bread under his clothes before the guards took him. Days passed in the darkness, and Sinbad could not think of any way to escape. Then one day, when his food was almost finished, Sinbad heard the sound of whimpering. He reached out his hand and felt the soft fur of an animal. It was a fox. The poor animal was thin and weak from hunger. "Poor little fox," said Sinbad, "you are in as bad shape as I am." And Sinbad gave the fox his last piece of bread. The fox was grateful and he licked Sinbad's fingers. Okay, so days passed. Sinbad was kept in a very dark cave. So he could hear whimpering over there. And then when he reached his hand out in the dark cave, he could feel the soft fur of an animal. To his surprise, it was a fox. The fox had grown very thin because of hunger. So Sinbad gave him the last piece of his bread. Fox was so pleased with this action of Sinbad that he licked Sinbad's fingers. Then the fox let Sinbad hold on to his tail and led him along a dark, narrow tunnel. In a little while, Sinbad could see daylight and smell fresh sea air. The fox had shown him a secret way out of the cave. The fox was grateful and he showed Sinbad a way out of the cave. What nice gesture! When Sinbad dragged himself out of the tunnel and into the sunshine, he found himself on top of a cliff overlooking the sea. He took the biggest diamond out of his bag and held it up between his fingers and thumb. so that it caught the sunlight. It flashed and sparkled so brightly that it was seen by a passing fishing boat. The fisherman came to his rescue, and he gave them a few of his diamonds to take him to another country. From there, after many difficulties and after sailing in many different ships, Sinbad was at last able to reach Baghdad, and he still had most of his diamonds. Okay, so this is Sinbad holding the fox's tail and going out of the tunnel, and these were the many diamonds that he was still left with. Chapter 5. Enjoy the rest of your milk. When Sinbad the sailor came to the end of his story, he turned to the boy who shared his name and said, "Do tell me, what do you think of the story? Do you believe it?" Again there was a twinkle in his eye. Young Sinbad laughed. He said that he had enjoyed the story very much, although he wasn't sure whether the pirates and the king who loved peppers and the sea monsters really existed. "But Ahmed, I'll tell you the part I liked the best," said young Sinbad. "I enjoyed it when the fox helped Sinbad the sailor get out of the cave. I don't believe any of it, but I wish things happened like this in real life." So this young Sinbad is telling Ahmed, the elder Sinbad, that I enjoyed the story, but the best part that I enjoyed was the fox helping Sinbad. Okay, I really wish that things in real life would be this good. "Perhaps your wish will come true, just as Sinbad's did," said the man who called himself Ahmed. "What do you mean?" asked young Sinbad. "Well, you were kind enough to share your breakfast with a hungry stranger," said Sinbad the sailor. "Maybe you will get the help that you need." And with that, he stood up, stretched his legs and arms, and gave the bowl back to the boy. There was still a little milk in it. "Now I must go," he said. "Thanks again, and goodbye." So the elder Sinbad said bye to this young boy. While leaving, he, sort of a riddle that he had placed in the conversation. He said that maybe, just maybe, you will get the help that you deserve and you need. Okay. And then young Sinbad asked, "What do you mean?" Because he was still confused at this point in time. He said, there's something more to this conversation. But then he did not exactly knew what it was. "Wait," said the boy. And Sinbad walked away. "Is your name really Ahmed? Where did you come from? How did you hear that story? Who are you?" With a lot of questions, Sinbad called back, "Ahmed is just one of my names, but most people call me by your name, Sinbad." "Sinbad? Ha!" laughed young Sinbad. "You'll be telling me next that you are the rich and famous Sinbad the sailor. But look at you. You don't look like a rich and famous person." "Good luck. Enjoy the rest of your milk," said the elder Sinbad. With that, Sinbad waved and joined the crowds of people on the street. Okay, so this is young Sinbad running after the elder Sinbad with many, many questions in his mind. And the elder Sinbad left the young Sinbad with many more questions in his mind. He said that his name was Sinbad, so he revealed his true identity. But then young Sinbad still did not believe because of the attire that the elder Sinbad was having. Young Sinbad waved back. Suddenly he felt sad. What was he to do now? He had no money and no work. Perhaps I should join a ship and sail away and have some adventures like Sinbad, he thought. He lifted his bowl to finish his milk. As he did so, he heard something rattle in the bowl. Something hard tapped against his teeth. What could it be? He looked into the bowl and was amazed to see something that sparkled so brightly in the sun that he had to close his eyes. He looked again, and there it was, an enormous diamond. "Come back!" young Sinbad yelled, jumping onto his feet. He ran as fast as his legs would carry him in the street and round the corner. He did not stop running. At last he caught up with the tall, handsome man with the bushy beard. "Sinbad!" he shouted. "Wait! I'm sorry, I did not believe you, but you've dropped this. You must really be Sinbad the sailor after all." "Hush! Shh!" said Sinbad quietly. "This is our secret. You must remember the fox in the story, don't you?" Young Sinbad nodded. "Yes, I remember. It was his favorite part of the story, and the fox wanted to help me because I was kind to him, didn't he? Well, I agree with him. Kindness should be rewarded, and that's why I wanted to help you. Keep the diamond, it will give you a chance to make a better life for yourself. Good luck. And with that, Sinbad the sailor disappeared into the crowds. So, this is how the story ends, with young Sinbad holding the enormous diamond in his hand gifted to him by Sinbad the sailor. Now, when Sinbad, the young Sinbad, approached Sinbad running through the crowd, and he approached Sinbad saying, "Sorry, I did not believe that you were the real Sinbad." So Sinbad said, "Shh, don't tell anyone. This is your and my secret. This secret belongs to the both of us. And I helped you because you were kind to me, and kindness should be rewarded. The fox from the story that I just told you helped me because I was kind to him." And then he repeats saying that kindness is always rewarded. So that's the moral that all of us should carry. Adventures keep on happening through our days. Some have big adventures, some have small adventures. Some may find themselves in bigger problems, some may find themselves in smaller problems. But a small act of kindness takes you a long way. So you should always be kind to people who help you, and also to the people who have nothing to do with you, because kindness is surely to be rewarded in God's place. So with that, I leave you with this fantastic nostalgic story of my childhood, Sinbad the Sailor. Let me know how you like this story in the comments down below. Like always, if you have not subscribed to the channel, please take your time, click on the subscribe button under the video, hit the like button so that I get motivated and keep on making stories like this for you. Thank you so much for your time and patient listening. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.